Hey, this is Travis with mtgxray. mtgxray is an app you can get on the Windows Store. You can download it now. We try to keep it updated with all the card sets as they come out. And it's a tool to help you brew. It's a tool to help you learn about deck building and make you a better Magic player. The overall concepts we're going to go over is how to score your deck, how to tune your mana, and how it can help you think about brew suggestions. And so we're going to cover all that very quickly in this video. And so basically I was just checking out face-to-face games. I saw they had a standard tournament they had played. I was kind of interested in this Golgari Monsters deck, copied that and pasted it in to mtgxray. The way you do that is you hit import deck, you take any normal deck list, just hit update. Don't worry about it if it didn't understand creatures, land, spells, whatever. You're good. Discard changes. Boom. So you can pretty much take arena format in and out of this. You can take most common deck list formats in and out of this as well. But let me show you. Here's the monsters deck, top 8. I got my spell binders, my deck binders, and boom, I come into this deck that the top took 8th place in top 8. Still nothing to sneeze at. So the first thing I said we could do is score. So scoring works by hitting the score button. But before you do anything, always hit your settings button. Let's make sure that it knows we're talking about a 60 card deck, not a limited deck. And when we score it, what we're asking Goldfish to do is play 1,000 Goldfish games out by itself, just like you would. Draw cards, lay them on the table, play by the rules of Magic. And it's going to do that out 8 turns in a game 1,000 times, right? So got your settings correctly inserted there, and just hit score, right? So I wouldn't look at the overall score of the deck. That's not actually that helpful. What's helpful is what's happening behind the scenes. What's happening behind the scenes is over 8 turns, you're getting 21 units of spells onto the board. Like a Llanowar Elf is a 1-drop. A Merfolk Branchwalker is a 2-drop. So between those two, that's 3 units of spells, right? So it's just, this is very important fundamental Magic. Just if you can play spells in a game, doesn't matter what order or what they are, just play as many and the most powerful spells you can, double spell when you can. That's a concept. That's what it's measuring there. Curve, everybody talks about curve, but we've actually come up with a measure. Curve is basically how efficiently you're using up your mana in a game. So ultimately, we can get into like how that's calculated, but you're using up 70% of the mana that was ever present on the board, and we're just adding it turn by turn, right? So drops and curve, very important concepts. Now, once you've scored your deck, you can investigate your deck. You can go and say, wow, Steel Leaf Champion, you're a 3-drop. I got 4 of you in here, but you got a lot of green mana costs. Let's go look at Steel Leaf Champion. So, on average, naturally, you're going to draw your first copy in a game. This isn't even your opening hand. You're going to draw it in a game almost 70% of the time, and you're going to get it on the battlefield over 80% of the time by turn 5. Now, if you click this, you can see a little more detail. Like, here's copy 1. Everything I just told you. It's often waiting in your hand for a few turns. Don't get confused. If your whole focus was to play Steel Leaf Champion, you might be able to get it out a lot sooner than turn 5. Okay, obviously everybody wants to get that on turn 3. This is not saying you're not capable of getting it on turn 3. It's just saying with all the other spells you typically play in a game, this is when you on average might get it down on the board. This other stat here, when you score your deck, is talking about you got 4 copies. So about 40% of the time, you're going to see first copy in your hand. You're going to get it down, and you get it down a little bit earlier than if you just naturally drew it in the game. Now, once again, just look at these numbers relatively. So remember, Steel Leaf, 84% of the chance for playing it out of our opening hand on turn 4, between turn 4 and 5. Let's look at Jadelight Ranger, a little bit less intensive green cost. Notice that we are, and these numbers jump around a little bit because each 1,000 games we play when we score, little variation just like you experience. But we're having a little bit easier turn playing it out of our opening hand, and it's coming down a half turn earlier than Steel Leaf Champion. What you can determine from that is that difference between the opening hand turn that Jade Light's coming down versus Steel Leaf. There's a half turn color screw that you will experience in your deck if you just do the math between those two. I mean, this is likely to come down earlier than turn 3.9. I could show you ways to get that, but we're going to make a new stat in here that everybody's used to of like, what's the earliest turn on average I could get it down on the board. That's not what this stat is, but we can compare apples to apples. And if this is in our opening hand, about 40% of the time, we are having an easier time playing it, and it's coming down right at turn 4, 3.9. Once again, Steel Leaf, turn 4.5, not as much chance playing in a game. So you are experiencing some penalty for having a 3 green color mana spell. And what you need to be telling yourself is sometimes if this is played a half turn later than Jade Light Ranger or the next turn, is it still useful? And I'm sure it is in this monsters deck. So that was scoring, right? Score the overall deck, boom, go into the individual cards. Something you may not have thought about on scoring was take this mid-range down from 8. Let's say the first 4 turns are extremely important to our development, and we want to see how our mid-range deck fares in the first 4 turns. How are we doing? Hit score. We're still at a high curve. We're still using a lot of our mana, and we're in the first 4 turns we expect to play 7 units of spells. So that could be a Llanowar Elf, a Merfolk Branchwalker, that's 3, and we'd have 4 units of mana left. That might be a Steel Leaf Champion and another Llanowar Elf, or it could be a 4-drop spell, like what do we have in this deck? Could have been a Nullhide, right? So we could have gone Llanowar, Branchwalker, Nullhide. Now, if you ever want to see these games played out the way you've got it laid out here, you can hit this hamburger menu, Mulligan Playground, hit the sword button, draw yourself up a nice little hand. In this one, we're starting with 1 land, a Llanowar Elf, and we're trying to get the Steel Leaf Champion. Kind of interesting, right? I guess we want to be on the, Arena. Arena, you wouldn't know if you're on the play or the draw. So we're going to hit example. Turns out we're on the play. We put the, is that a Woodland Cemetery? Hold on. Which one is Woodland Cemetery? Is that must be a check land. So Woodland Cemetery comes down. Yeah, it's definitely a check land because we got lucky. We were on the draw. We drew a forest. We played the forest. We played the Llanowar Elf, and off our game goes. Right, we got kind of lucky on that one. But basically, you can play example games out with that hand and see, some ideas of what your luck would have been like. You can draw different hands here. You can shape your hand, say, no, I definitely want this. So this is all part of scoring. And while we're on the Mulligan Playground, let's talk about being a better Mulligan player, right? So, we're going to play this Goldfish out 8 turns. We don't know if we're on the play or the draw. And this particular hand is a good hand. It's a snap keep because what it did was it played 1,000 games with this hand, and on average 1,000 games you drop this many units of mana. The deck averages a little bit less than that, and if you mulligan, you're going to average somewhere in here with this deck. If you go down to 6 cards, this is what 1,000 games is telling us of stats wise. You're going to average about that much mana dropped in a game. But let's take out the Llanowar Elves. Let's say we didn't have that and we had another spell. Wild Growth. All right, you hit score. And we're still doing pretty good, with this. But what if we had a one land hand, right? How risky is that? What if we had this? This is probably not a good hand, right? You know, one land. It's a snap mall, right? And so it is a pretty reasonable approach where you can take a random hand. It doesn't give you the answer. It gives you a chance to think about this. This is obviously a mall. There is no land in your hand. Score it. I mean, that's just pathetic, right? So let's draw another one. All right, another one lander. What would you do, right? So you would be better off mulliganing when you see this. But what if you had two lands? What if you had two lands? Let's score that. So suddenly, two lands and a Merfolk Branchwalker, you're in business. That's a great hand. So that's a little bit about the scoring and all that type stuff. I don't know if our mulligan game works anymore. Yeah. The mulligan game was trying to show you some visual hands. We'll work on that game again. This is going to be a really fun game. You have the timed amount of time to determine if this hand is keepable or not. So we'll come back to that. We'll get that working. So let's go back into our monsters deck. I showed you how to score the whole deck itself. I showed you after that you can go tap on, individual cards and get some pretty interesting stats. Hopefully they're useful to you. I showed you how you could come up here to the Mulligan Playground and practice your mulligans. We're trying to get the London Mulligan in soon. That'll be cool to practice. And showed you how you could see some example games if you're kind of hardcore and want to look at that printout. But next, mtgxray can really help you tune your mana. So this is a top 8 deck. This is probably the correct mana configuration. We could prove whether that is the case or not. So let's put mtgxray to the test. Let's take out the Evolving Wilds and put it into question. Let's take these quite a few of these rare lands out and put them into question. And what I mean by into question is if you leave it up here in your main deck, like this Field of Ruin, mtgxray doesn't understand your strategy for Field of Ruin of destroying someone's other land. It just doesn't understand the game that deeply. So what we've done is made a decision to, like, anything you keep up here in your main deck stays in your main deck, right? But what is up for consideration is the sideboard. The sideboard's your maybe board. We should just call this the playground maybe board area. These pieces of technology down here, these lands, I call them tech, are candidates for making it back up into your deck in place of basic lands when you hit this mana tune button. So let's call into question, maybe another Evolving Wilds would have been a good choice. We know it's probably not. But what we're doing is we're giving it extra choices to think about down here. There's only going to be so many slots it can fill in up here in your mana area when we hit this mana button. So let's just see. So normally you'd want to pump your mana tune up for constructed deck to quite a few minutes. But for purposes of this, let's just do 1 minute. Let's see what it comes up with. We're going to tune this deck to be its optimal, kind of a mid-range. 7 turns really in aggro. That's mid-range too. We're going to tune it kind of like that and give it 1 minute. And let's see what it does with the mana. Let's see if it's smart enough to put a lot of those rare lands, those check lands and those pain lands back in. Let's see what it thinks about Evolving Wilds. Maybe one Evolving Wilds was a good choice, maybe it wasn't. I would not take these results as definitive because we're only running this for 1 minute. This is just demoing it, right? So, but you need to let it run longer. And the more choices you have in the sideboard and the more space you have in the deck, you definitely need to give it more minutes. Let's just let this finish. So what this is doing is going through way more combinations of this. It's probably going through 54,000 combinations if you're seeing these numbers up here. It's playing each of those combinations out about 1,000 times against each other scoring them, and deciding which one's going to come out victorious. Okay. Well, it didn't pick the Evolving Wilds. What did it leave down here? Okay. You can tell 1 minute was not long enough, because I do think this deck would benefit from another breeding pool, and yeah, probably a Woodland Cemetery. But it's interesting. You can do this iteratively. So right now up here, there's still basic lands that are fair game, right? And literally it's gonna be at a new advantage point, right? It's decided that there's definitely 4 overgrown tombs, and definitely 4 hinterland harbors, and so now it can spend all its time just thinking about these things you have in your sideboard, these 2 lands plus your 2 evolving wilds. It's gonna get a lot done in a minute. Let's hit it again. You can be iterative with this, but remember, anything it sees up in your main board besides basics, it's going to think you made that deck decision. It's not going to question you. It's not going to, we started with 4 overgrown tombs. When I hit this mana button this time, it will always have 4 overgrown tombs during this thinking process. Look how many games iterations it's able to play out. Like all the deck it's looking at way less combinations to solve this problem, because there's only so many combinations when you have 4 cards in and 2 card space or something. The number of games it's able to play against itself is approaching 8,000-9,000 games. So I'm feeling I would still let it run longer, but I'm feeling a little bit more confident that maybe a tiny 0.2% edge is maybe gained by not having the Evolving Wilds. I don't know. I wouldn't make that conclusion yet till I ran it longer, but you can always score it again. You can say, well, that is a pretty good curve. Oh, and don't forget apples to apples, right? Earlier in your brain, you were probably thinking of turn 8. Let's do that. Well, compared to the earlier build, playing 8, it turns out to 8 turns, we were hovering around 20 drops of mana. It might be that this person in the top 8 potentially could have improved slightly their mana base. I don't want to make that claim with just only thinking using the mana button for 2 minutes. That would be absurd. But just by the numbers of what we come up with so far, these are looking slightly better in terms of the mana. But you'd have to do more time on the settings, really, and you need to go play it out. Remember, this is just a deck suggestion. So anyway, I've showed you the score button overall for your deck. I've showed you looking at an individual card, seeing when it hits the board. I've showed you very quickly the mulligan playground, scoring your mulligan hands and watching games play out. And we just tuned our mana automatically with push of a button to probably a very high degree of accuracy. The last thing I want to show you is the think button. The only difference between the think and the mana button is things you put down here in the sideboard on mana. It only looks at it, and it only messes with your mana base up top, and it only considers things that are mana related down bottom here in your playground area. Think button will look at anything that's down here in this sideboard maybe board area, spells, lands, anything, and anything up here is fair game in terms of how many spaces are left in your deck. Like, it's not going to touch any of these, but like, let's say we shave off a Llanowar Elf, a Branchwalker, a Jade Light. I mean, these are all super. A Steel Leaf, they're a little bit harder to cast. Like, maybe just one less Steel Leaf might be a smart deck tech decision. But let's also give it search through the library, instance, blue, 1 casting cost, opt. Opt is interesting. People often talk about, could opt replace a land? So let's put it in the sideboard. Let's give it Let's give it the option of, I don't know, 3 ops. Let's be realistic. Maybe 2 ops. And so it's going to decide, like, would an op had maybe been better than any of these other choices. So you see how I have a little bit of room to think. 56, it's a 56 card deck right now. It needs to be a 60 card deck. That's 4 spaces to think, plus the forests and swamp. Those are fair game for coming out as well. So 9 spots total. If any of these would be better than a basic land or would be best to fill in one of the spots, they're going in. So let's try it. Let's think on this. Okay. I'm going to bring it down to 1 minute just for the demonstration purposes. So let's think about whether opt or, yeah, basically we're trying to test opt as a deck check to just see if the basics of Magic would have been better off with an opt. Opt will get us in our programming to definitely to our lands when we're needing lands. When it's running these goldfish things, it is making intelligent decisions. You know, just baseline basic intelligent of like, I'm shy on lands. I need to opt for, you know, scry, get a land. Oh, I have plenty of lands. I'm flooded. I'd rather have a spell. So it's reasonable. It's reasonable with this opt. See, it's going back and forth between 1 and 2. It's getting a decent number of games in. Okay. Well, it liked 1 opt. I mean, this deck maybe, once again, I don't go off of thinking, auto thinking for 1 minute, but just maybe 1 opt in place of a branch walker. I don't know. Branch walker's pretty good. I really doubt that. I doubt it. But if you thought, you know, I could give up and make room, like you could make room with went back to 4 Steel Leaf Champions. Just give it longer. Just when you think, I'm just showing you 1 minute. That's really not enough to think. But I start to believe in it in terms of sheer mana curve, what I'm playing in a game, the proportions of my mana, all that. This is mtgxray. It's a tool. Once again, you can get it on the Windows Store. We're working on a website as well, mtgxray.com. It'll be ready when we get it ready. And you can sign up and to our mailing list. Keep in touch about all of this. That was all the functions in X-Ray, all in one video. We're going to be updating it for War of the Spark soon. So I hope you enjoy this tool. You can give us feedback at info@mtgxray.com. That's a fantastic way to get a hold of us. I don't get on social media a lot, so I won't see your tweets and things like that. So just email us at info@mtgxray.com. Let us know if you're successful. Invite us to your Discord. We'll answer questions. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.